I was booking the trip to London and Paris with the family.
Okay.
Right. And one of the things we are going to do is go to a show in the West End. I guess it's like their Broadway. Right?
Okay.
Like I know nothing about theater.
You will soon.
Yes. You know, there's the part of London where you go see shows. And we're going to go see a show. And we're going to go see Back to the Future.
Cool.
Which is, I didn't know was
I
a
didn't
show.
know people in Europe even knew what Back to the Future was.
Yeah. Yeah, sure, why not? I mean,
I guess, yeah.
I guess it's a very, you're right. We watched the movie recently with Michaela, and it is a very American movie. Like,
It is.
It's very,
Yeah.
you know, it's Pepsi everywhere, and like it's the future. The future is about like inflation and you know spending and the
That's
economy.
true.
And,
Yeah.
like, the future is, and like the entire like theme of the second movie is like about getting rich and like how that can change the future. And,
Yeah.
whatever. But
Because he had that book, right, with
Yeah.
all the sports stuff in it that he
Yes.
could go and bet
Yeah,
on.
the
Yeah,
almanac.
that was the second one.
Yeah.
That's right. Kaylee, I showed her the first one maybe last year, and she had never seen it before.
yeah.
She liked it. It was good.
It's a good. The first one is better than. What's funny is when I was a kid, I really liked the second one, and I watched the first two with Michaela, and she like was so bored by the second one that she's like, "Why are we? We didn't even finish it."
Really?
Yeah, Jess and I finished it later, but Michaela was not into it.
Different times, I guess.
Yeah.
I thought those movies were awesome growing
Yeah.
up. I
Yeah.
used to be so into them.
The first one is still really, really good.
The first one's great. It's
the-
incredible.
Yeah. And the second one's, it's kind of lazy. It's like they go back and they show the first movie, right? Like, because
Yep.
he has to go back, spoiler, for this 40-year-old movie.
For those who haven't seen it in the last 50 years.
So they have to, like, they end up, like, just showing some of the old movie. Like, it's kind of, I'm sure it felt kind of neat at the time to, like, watch some of the first movie in the second movie from a slightly different angle. But
Yeah.
from a story perspective, I'm like, oh, this is kind of like just a retread, right? Like we've already know what happens here. We've seen this play out.
So is the play on the first one, or is it something different, just themed Back to the Future?
You know, I actually don't know. I assume it's just like the first movie as a play.
Did you show Michaela knowing that you're going to the play?
No, it's a happy.
It just worked out.
Yeah, what's that called? A happy circumstance or whatever
Yeah,
it
I
is.
guess,
Like yeah,
yeah.
it's just a happy accident. It's basically we were showing her movies from the 80s, and it happens to be that we're gonna go see one on the London version of Broadway.
Is she too young for Jurassic Park?
I don't think she is. She was just talking about Jaws the other day and how she'll never watch Jaws because it's like supposed to be so scary. I'm
It's
like,
so boring.
I don't think you're gonna be that scared.
No, it's like an animatronic
Yeah,
shark that jumps
yeah,
up out of
yeah.
nowhere.
So I showed her a picture of the shark, like the actual shark that they used to film and everything, and it just looks like so. If you think about movies these days, if there's a shark underwater, they'll just like CGI a shark underwater,
Right.
and it will look a lot
The Meg.
scarier. Yeah, it won't just be a fin going
around.
and then occasionally a mouth.
Isn't it crazy how you have such an iconic song with two notes?
Yes,
Dun,
dun, dun. And Michaela like loves,
and it's
the-
literally just two notes.
Yeah.
And it's just like dun 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 dun. And it's
Oh, then it goes to dun, dun, it's a different note now.
yeah, that's true, I guess. But yeah, she should watch Jurassic Park. That's like my favorite movie of all time.
Yes, Jurassic Park is definitely on my list of things to show her. Although, and there's a new Jurassic Park coming out this year, right? And I wonder if you
Is
have
it Jurassic
to watch,
Park or World?
Is it Jurassic World this year? Because we already did Jurassic World.
Jurassic
Wasn't that-
Worlds are not very good.
So okay, so there's already 6 movies done. They've done the trilogy twice.
Wait, you're saying there's 6 Jurassic Park worlds done?
Yes, there are 6 Jurassic dinosaur movies right now.
Okay.
What's this one?
Jurassic World Rebirth.
Jurassic World Rebirth. Okay. We're just doing it again.
Yes. We have an idea. Let's do exactly what we just did again.
But this time, I don't even know who Chris Pratt. Like, it's not Chris Pratt anymore.
It's
like,
not.
We'll just have.
He gave up.
He's done. That trilogy is now. We're moving on to
A
whoever
different trilogy
whoever the
at the
hot
same
new thing
island,
is. Yeah,
making the same
Maybe,
mistakes
yeah.
with the same animals. Again.
History doesn't always repeat, but it often rhymes.
Sometimes it does repeat in the instance of those movies.
And sometimes you just watch the same movie in the sequel, like in Back to the Future 2. See, it's all.
Yeah,
You know, it
my
comes
favorite was the what was it? And by favorite I mean least favorite was the second Jurassic World where they're like auctioning the dinosaurs off in like Morocco or something.
They're in like a mansion.
There's that part too. Yeah,
There's
they
a different
eventually
part?
goes to the mansion in the end, and there's like why it doesn't make any sense.
And then there's like little kids climbing around.
Correct.
And there's velociraptors.
Yeah, there
like
like
in the
happens to
ceiling.
be like a gymnasium in the house
Yeah,
while this
sure.
auction's going on.
Rich
Yeah.
people, you know.
Right. Jurassic Park is great though.
The
We
original
watched
Jurassic Park is amazing.
the first and the third one
Yeah.
recently. We skipped over the Vince Vaughn one. They're great. They hold up so well.
I don't know how you can do that to Vince Vaughn though. I mean, I feel like it's worth watching just Vince Vaughn.
Well, the reason why we didn't watch the second one is because I had already recently watched the second one. Kayla
So you
wanted to watch the third
recently
one.
watched the second Jurassic Park movie by choice?
Well, you watch the first one, then the second one automatically starts playing.
I mean, you're helpless. You're powerless.
I can't reach the remote. I can't change it. I got things I got to do. It's just on in the background. It's not very good, though, the second one. The third one's actually pretty good.
The third one is where they go back to the island.
Their child was parasailing
Right, naturally.
right next to Jurassic
Of
Park
course.
Island, Jurassic whatever it is.
Of course.
Boat gets eaten. He detaches in the woods. His parents go and
Yeah.
get Grant, I think is the guy's
Sure.
name is,
Yeah.
and try to go rescue him.
Rescue mission.
Right.
It's always good to have a rescue mission.
Yeah, and a ton of people die.
I'm impressed that you
all the henchmen die immediately, and they're just there. So yeah,
you can watch movies in the background while you're working. I cannot do that. I will be distracted.
You
by
have to
that.
sit and focus on
Yeah.
them. That annoys Kaylee that I always have like 3 things going on.
Yeah, yeah. I'm a music working guy. Like I like to have music playing in the background.
See, I like to have like some TV or
Yeah,
something.
yeah.
Or silence.
All right. Well, that was not at all what I was going to talk about with you today, but here we are. Welcome to the Compound Growth Podcast with Colin and Wheeler, where we talk all things growth, from financial growth to career growth, personal development to societal progress. We explore how each layer builds on the next, compounding over time to shape who we become. Each week, we break down complex ideas and emerging trends into clear, actionable insights. Because growth isn't just about numbers, it's about understanding the world and our place in it. The information in this material is for general information only and is not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. Investment advice offered through Integrated Partners, doing business as Ko-Fi Advisors LLC, a registered investment advisor. Integrated Partners does not provide legal, tax, mortgage, advice, or services. Please consult your legal tax advisor regarding your specific situation. Past performance is no guarantee of future results. All investing involves risk, including loss of principal. No strategy assures success or protects against loss. The economic forecasts set forth in this material may not develop as predicted, and there can be no guarantee that the strategies promoted will be successful. A few weeks ago, I was listening to some podcasts over the weekend, and they happened to all be themed on AI, and they kind of had me thinking about the disruption coming from AI. So,
What isn't themed on AI
right,
these days?
yeah, it's true. So we met for our weekly coffee, Monday morning coffee, and I feel like you were in a really good space. I think you'd recently gotten back from Greece, and you're
Yes.
like in this great space. And I walk in, and I'm like, we're all gonna die. We're all doomed, which is not actually what I was saying, of course, but that was the vibe. It was like Colin's in a really good place. It's a beautiful day. We're at this coffee shop sitting outside, and
Wheeler's
here's-
not in a good place.
Yeah, here I come, like saying, "Hey, we got to figure some stuff out."
Wah, wah, wah.
Yeah, squash the vibe a little
Yeah,
bit.
that's all right.
So I start kind of talking to you about what my concerns are, and you referenced something that Jamie Dimon had said recently, and I thought it was a really good term.
Yeah, so what Jamie Dimon was basically saying is in the event of a recession or some sort of depression, he's bomb-proofed JP Morgan. So he doesn't know what's going to happen with the other banks and the other major firms out there, but he knows JP Morgan's going to be good because they're prepared for that sort of thing. This led us to our discussion, how do we get our business and our own personal lives and our clients' lives bomb-proofed,
Right.
so to speak,
Right.
where if maybe not the worst was to happen, I guess if the worst was to happen, money may not matter that much.
Right.
If there's like some sort
That's
of
a real
nuclear
bomb.
disaster. That's
Yeah.
a legit bomb.
Yeah.
But in the hypothetical sense of the phrase, bomb-proofing, what can you do to protect yourself?
Yep.
And what does that look like?
Yeah, exactly that. So I think it's good to kind of set an idea or kind of get a frame of reference for where we are today. So there's this investment researcher named Mary Meeker. She's a professional investor. She writes great research. She is basically the queen of the net. They referred to her back when people called the internet the net in the 90s.
Okay.
All right. So in the 90s, she was dubbed the queen of the net.
Interesting.
And she had her ear to the ground, and she would make prescient predictions that would eventually come true.
Is this the .com
Well,
bubble? Did she get that?
She did get the .com bubble as
All right.
well, but like in general, I think she has a good idea of where the trends are going, where technology is going. So she's often referred to as like the Warren Buffett of the tech sector.
Interesting.
Right. So she came out with, she has her own research, her own investment firm, and has her own research alignment with that investment firm. And she came out with a report basically talking about the trends in artificial intelligence and where she thinks we're all going. So this is her recap of what ChatGPT 4.0 can do right now.
Oh, this is what you... Yeah. Yep.
So right now, ChatGPT can write or edit anything. It can summarize and explain complex material, tutor you on nearly any subject, be your thinking partner, as you and I usually...
We use that all the time.
Right? Automate repetitive work, role play anyone you need, which is also a fun way to prepare for meetings. Connect you to tools, offer therapy and companionship.
That's a little scary.
Very scary. It's like Her. Did you ever see that movie, Her?
No.
No, I didn't either. But I know there's a movie. It's the one with Scarlett Johansson's voice, right? And Joaquin Phoenix like falls in love with the AI in his head.
Right.
Just in his earpods. But help you find purpose and organize your life. So those are all the things it can do.
Now.
Right? That's a lot.
That is a lot.
That's so, like, I feel like that was 10 different lists or different items on the list. And, you know, a couple years ago, each item had its own person that you would talk to. Right?
Now it's one program.
It's not even a person. Yeah, it's a program.
Right.
Yeah. So Mary Meeker thinks in just 5 years, we're going to go from that list to this list. And this list is ChatGPT will be able to generate human-level text, code, and logic. So it's not just, you know, mediocre elementary school business plans being put together, but
I feel like it's almost there right now.
yeah, you're probably right. Like it's always getting smarter and faster.
It's remarkable.
Yeah. Create full-length films and games, which I have a lot of thoughts on, and I really don't want this to come true, but it's probably going to come true.
Well, maybe it could improve the quality for what people are doing, or maybe increase the amount of content being released.
Yeah, or augment the content, right?
Exactly.
But then there's this whole can of worms about replacing the writers, or, you know, aging or de-aging the actors, or just replacing the actors because they have their own
People.
Yeah, they have their own image. They don't even need people anymore. They can just create the image. And
You want to know what's crazy? What if the movie is different for you than it is for me? What
Yeah,
if
like
the
if we
characters
have-
look different to you than they do to me based off of preference?
yeah, it's all customized to the viewer.
Right.
It's scary.
That is.
Understand and speak like a human, to your point from a couple weeks ago when we talked about how do I know
That it's you.
that it's you. Power advanced personal assistants, operate human-like robots, that's coming. Run autonomous customer service and sales, personalize entire digital lives, build and run autonomous businesses, drive autonomous discovery in science, collaborate creatively like a partner. I'm not even going to touch the AI in 2035 list because...
Give me two.
Okay, and so that was the 2030 list.
Okay.
2035.
The 2030 list doesn't scare me that much.
Okay, let's scare you then. I'll try to scare you a little
Try
bit
to
more.
scare me.
All right. Conduct scientific research. We don't need scientists anymore. We've got AI.
Okay, that's a little scary.
All right. Design advanced technologies like engineering biotech, prototype engineer energy systems, prototype weapons, all without a human having any touch on that whatsoever. Simulate human-like minds, operate autonomous companies, whole companies We've talked about this.
We have
When is there going to be a one-person billion-dollar company or a zero-person?
0% billion-dollar company.
Yeah. Perform complex physical tasks. So the robots are now cleaning, right? They're not just dancing.
So we're talking robots.
Robots probably like surgery,
Yep.
right?
So robotic surgery is already a thing,
It
but you
is.
need humans to do it.
Right. From afar. They
From
can
afar.
Yeah.
You can, or locally. Yeah.
coordinate systems globally. So, everything that's the supply chain would be
So a
automated.
major company
Yeah.
becomes automated through
Ships.
shipping, manufacturing, sourcing.
Yep, containers, etc. Model full biological systems offer. Well, they could do they could do Jurassic Park.
That could
By
be kind of cool.
2035, we could have the dinosaurs.
I would like to see a few dinosaurs.
Colin's boyhood dream is coming true.
I'm excited.
Offer expert level decisions, shape public debate and policy. That one's scary. And build immersive virtual worlds. Finally, we can go online and
Metaverse.
just go to the metaverse.
It's just going to be like Ready Player One.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that all of this is to say that this is happening. It's unstoppable because this is like the mutually assured destruction aspect of it, right? It's if we don't do this, China does it or somebody else does it or whatever, it's happening.
Yep.
And there are too many people with too many interests to stop it from happening. So then what speed is it going to happen at? And how is it going to happen? How is it going to impact our everyday lives, right?
Right.
And this is what I was thinking about when I met you for coffee that morning, because we do need to think about us and our business, right, in our personal lives, but we're also responsible for the financial success in one form or another, to one degree or another, for hundreds of other people.
Right.
And we have an opportunity to help them prepare for this shift and navigate it, right, the best we can.
So on that front, bomb proofing.
Yeah.
Do you want to start by focusing on people?
I think, yes, let's start by focusing on people.
So with this list, a lot of jobs are going to get replaced, in theory,
Or at least changed.
or changed, or consolidated, combination of all of them. And something that's kind of interesting and also scary at the same time is when we talk about bomb proofing, you're talking about insulating your own balance sheet in a lot of ways, right?
Yep.
What happens if your job is to be replaced? What happens if there is consolidation and all of that good stuff? Because a lot of the things on that list affect a lot of industries.
Yeah.
Something that I thought was very interesting was I was looking at performance metrics and numbers for households and savings and what people have on hand in the event something was to happen. And in the event the average family was to lose their job and all that kind of other stuff.
Right.
I'll throw some more scary facts at you.
Uh-oh. These are not theoretical. So now we're getting really scary.
These are legit.
Yeah.
Okay. 40% of U.S. households have less than $300 saved. 50% of Americans have under $600 saved. Half the population have less than $600. 28% have under $1,000 in personal savings. And then on top of that, the median household savings in total for working families is $8,000.
Okay. So median on average for an American working family in savings,
$8,000.
$8,000. Now, let's cite the source. What was the source for the research here?
Federal Reserve website.
According to the government.
Yes. Statistica.
Okay.
And Lending Club, Experian. There's like 5 other ones here.
Yeah, all
But
right. So we've
there's some
cross-referenced the
legitimately,
data.
legitimate sources here.
So that's pretty scary.
Yep.
So I think that's a really good moment for us to recognize the fact that the clients that we are working with may be, on the far end of that spectrum in terms of their ability to
Totally.
save. Right?
Yep.
But even that. So let's say that there's 2 options here. You're either in a position to save,
Yep.
or you're not. And I think what you just covered is a lot of people who are not in that position.
Yeah, I mean, what this is basically telling you is that 60% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck.
Yeah.
It's actually probably more. It's closer to 70.
Yeah.
So that's a pretty scary number.
Yeah. I think what's tricky there is that frequently I hear stats about the amount of wealth that's sitting in money market funds and how we're basically at or near all-time highs
For money market savings.
But that's not the average. First of all, the average person doesn't have a money market account.
Well, the average person doesn't even know what a money market account is.
True.
Which,
Yeah.
by the way, if you're listening and you don't know what a money market account is, think savings account.
Yeah, think high
Through an
yield
institution.
savings, right?
Right.
Yeah, with an overnight exchange rate, which is what gives you that interest rate.
Yeah.
But there's money market in a brokerage firm. There's money market in Chase Bank, J.P. Morgan.
Right.
Right. They have different returns, and you have different reasons to have these things. But either way, they're a step beyond savings.
Right.
Right. They're a step beyond the checking account.
If you were in someone's shoes right now, you're talking to our clients, they're worried about this particular situation, and we had a deep dive on this for how we're not only going to work to insulate our clients from bomb-proofing clients, but also
Yeah.
the business, so to speak.
Yeah.
What are some of the highlights? What are some of the steps?
So I think for the clients that we're working with,
Mm-hmm.
we've always, and let's say that there's two groups that we'll just put people in: the people who are retired and the people who are not retired.
Yep.
Right. And obviously, there's people who are not retired but soon to be retired. You can kind of get into the levels there. But if you're retired, then having a good approach to your spending is already built into the plan, right? And you're not working,
Yep.
so you're not worried about the disruption necessarily. Now you can have economic disruption that affects the markets and affects the return on your portfolio, et cetera. But
Sure.
we want to make sure that people know where their next retirement paycheck is coming from this month, this year, the next 3 years, et cetera.
Right. Yeah. I mean, your transition from retirement, well, I'll say making money, having a job, to retirement should be fairly seamless.
Yeah.
If it's set up appropriately. If you have the right savings set aside, you have the right account set aside.
Yep.
You've worked with a planner on budgeting and things like that. You should know how much money that you would need and like to take out to maintain your lifestyle and hit your goals and everything in retirement.
Right.
So if that's the case, and if you have those proper accounts set up, you shouldn't even notice a change in your paycheck when you do ultimately retire. It should be pretty seamless to the point where when you retire, you should start receiving income from your portfolio if you've done things properly.
Yeah. Yeah. And of course, there are other sources that you might have. Like you might have a pension. There are still some Americans that have a pension.
Absolutely.
Or Social Security or rental income or whatever it might be for an income source that's outside of your just investments and retirement savings.
Right. I have another interesting stat for you.
Okay.
Okay. So I want to hit you with savings rates, historically speaking. In World War II, I'll say in the 40s and 50s, do you know what the average savings rate was for an American?
I do not.
27%
Okay.
was the average savings rate. In the 1980s, the average savings rate was 12%.
Makes sense.
Now the average savings rate is 4.9%.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think a lot of that has to come down to the fact that inflation has picked up more than wage inflation. And that's kind of what this is breaking down here.
Yeah. And that we talked about that in a previous episode where wages haven't been able to keep up with inflation. But there's also, I feel like, the evolution of our consumerist economy, right? You talk about World War II and then the 1950s and like what we spent money, how we spent money. That was very, very different from where we are today. In the 80s was when we really made that shift.
Right.
So you could see that savings rate come down as there's more opportunity and more variety for you to spend money.
Yeah, I mean, the booming 80s, that was a pretty crazy time. I mean, you look at like the Wall Street movies.
Right, of course.
That was peak
Yeah.
of all that kind of stuff. But
Yeah.
I mean, it is fascinating to me that as time goes on, you would think that if you were to design a perfect world, that people would be making more money, saving more money, have like an easier transition to retirement in the same way that healthcare should be improving. There should be less conflict in the world.
Yeah.
Things should be better socially, all of that stuff. And there have been some improvements, certainly, if you go back
Yep.
far enough. But there really hasn't been that much improvement to I'll say, people's economics in a lot of ways. In fact, in a lot of ways, it's gone the opposite direction.
I think that's where people start to find themselves looking at the American way
Right.
in a
Consumerism.
yeah, in a dark light, right? Like it's, if we talked about like what this economy is capable of versus what it delivers. There is a wide gap there, right? I think that when we're talking about these things, one thing you just said, like it should be this. There is a world where AI actually helps us get to that.
Right.
And if you want to just be optimistic, that's maybe what you're keeping an eye on, right?
I think if I'm to be optimistic about AI, I would love to see AI help educate people on finances from an earlier age.
Right.
It blows my mind how that is not a class.
Yeah.
How that's not taught to people from a younger age, because education, in my opinion, is probably the biggest problem in the financial world right now. People are preyed on from a young age with student loans, and you don't know the problems that you have until you have to start making those payments and you have your job. It doesn't hit you until later on in life.
Yep.
And that puts you in a tough situation in the same way that auto loans and a bunch of other things can do that too. So if you had like an AI system, if I was to design an AI app, it would be almost implemented into people's lives so much that when you get a paycheck, it automatically sorts it all out for them.
I think what's good and bad about that is that it's not necessarily improving financial literacy. It's solving
No.
a problem. It's basically treating the symptom.
It's kind of like Social Security.
Right. Yeah.
We're going to help you get out of the Great Depression by putting this benefit in place. And it's
Right.
the same thing with an AI program that
Yeah.
just takes it over. But
Well, I think what Social Security, like, yes, obviously it came on the other side of the Great Depression, but it was also there to be like, you've worked really hard. We recognize that you can't work anymore. You shouldn't go broke. Here's some money.
yeah,
Right?
we don't want you working in a factory till you're 75.
Yeah. Charlie Munger referred to this idea of just like basic worldly wisdom, right? Like just learn the basics of life and, how everyday common sense is going to play out in your lives. And he thought that should be a class, right? It should be a class in college, certainly, but even before that. And actually, Michaela's school that she's going to next year, it is a class.
It
which
is.
really cool.
Common sense?
Yeah, common sense, basically. They have a different term.
Of course, I doubt they call it
Different
common
names,
sense.
Not just like you should know this.
It's the theme, though. Yeah.
There's a trivia game that my friends and I play every year when we go away for our annual guys trip, and it's like things you should know, right? And like you don't know them, and it's really embarrassing. But I think when we're talking about bomb proofing, we're not trying to hit a panic button, right?
No.
We're trying to empower, and we're trying to make sure that people are taking a proactive approach to their finances. And I think that an app that helps people do that would be a great idea, but it can't be doing it for them because then they lose that worldly wisdom themselves.
Right.
They need to develop their own financial literacy. And one of the things that's like a basic financial literacy term is like the concept of an emergency reserve, right? And there are rules, there are like financial planning guidelines that we've talked about with our clients, having 3 months set aside, maybe 6 months set aside if you have more volatility in your income.
Or a year for a retiree.
Yeah, a year for a retiree. But I do think that we are now reaching a point where it would be wise for people to think about their emergency reserves, if they have them, as maybe something that maybe they thought they had solved for this goal, right? And they said, okay, we've got 3 months set aside, we've got 6 months set aside, we're done. I think it's time to revisit that and think about what bomb proofing means in terms of being able to just like live your everyday lives if there is a significant disruption to the economy. And I think it needs to go from 3 to 6 months to maybe more like a year.
Yeah, I remember when I graduated from college and I was trying to make it, and even in the beginning phases of being a financial planner and trying to make it and living paycheck to paycheck. It's funny, I was at a meeting this morning with another gentleman in our industry, and we were reminiscing about that. And it was amazing how much better I felt when I could get to a point where I was trying to like stash some money aside.
Yeah.
And I finally got to a point where I had 3 months set aside.
Yeah.
And that was the biggest weight off of my shoulders because I knew that if my tire popped,
Right.
I would be able to replace it.
Yeah.
And in fact, that did happen when I was in the very early phases. My tire popped in my car and I was driving around on a donut tire for like 2 months because I literally couldn't afford to put another tire on my car.
Yeah.
Because I was like struggling. And I think that's the reality of most people. But, like $20 here, $50 there, $100 there. And it just keeps adding up and adding up and adding up. And after a year or two, to get, that 3 months was a game changer.
Yeah. And we've been there. Like, we know what it's like to live paycheck to paycheck, or honestly, live less than paycheck to paycheck.
Right.
If you're living on credit, it's less than paycheck to paycheck.
That's true.
I think that, you have to recognize that this isn't something that's always easily achieved, but it's still something to strive for. And if you think about it as an opportunity cost, like, well, I could be putting this money in my IRA, or, well, I could be investing in Palantir, or I could be, just buying whatever I think the next hot AI stock is. Maybe that's my strategy for fighting this. I think the confidence and the empowerment of having the emergency reserve set aside so you can navigate this, and that can actually prepare you or maybe enable you to take risk in other areas. Because if that's wrong, you have this backup. It's like if you're building a house, you want to lay a foundation that the house isn't going to fall down.
You do not want to skimp on the foundation of a house.
Yeah, exactly.
I think as I look at our client base and the people that we know and we've talked about who are the most successful people, they all did it slowly.
Yeah.
I don't know of a single person that started a business and hit it really big in a year.
Yeah.
I mean, certainly, some businesses take off quicker than others. But the people who are really successful, it takes time. And I think trying to use cash to take on more risk. I was talking with one of my buddies the other day, Dogecoin. Do you remember when this popped up?
Oh, I do. Multiple times.
So my buddy I don't remember how much. It was a very small amount of money when it was trading for next to nothing. And then it shot up. And he had, I want to say it was like $80,000 in Dogecoin in a matter of like a few months. I knew that him and his family were kind of like not struggling, but they needed the money.
Right.
And I said, hey man, like this is a once in a lifetime opportunity. Like you went from literally, it was like $1,000 to $80,000 in a matter of a few months. You should probably sell some of this and take some profit and insulate, have that cash reserve, deploy it other places, at least take some money out.
Yeah.
He didn't do it.
Yeah.
And he wrote it all the way back down. And he was super depressed for a long time. It didn't work out. But I've made the same mistake before. I bought Nvidia when it was like at $13 and I sold it at 26 thinking I was an absolute rock star because I had 100% rate of return. If I would have left it, it would have been a completely different situation. But the fact is because of that, I was able to build up cash reserves. I was able to do other things and deploy. So it's not necessarily the loss that I think about. It's the opportunities that gain gave me.
Right.
And the peace of mind to have those sorts of priorities taken care of with the cash reserve, if there is an emergency expense or something big pops up, we'll be all right.
Yeah. I think there's FOMO, right? And it's strong these days, and right? It's if you see everybody, it feels like everybody. If you see this guy getting rich on Dogecoin and that woman getting rich on Nvidia,
or all these people on TikTok that have the recipe for day trading that's going to make you rich, sign up for my masterclass.
It's easy to feel like you're missing out and to fear that you're missing out. And there is always opportunity cost, but opportunity cost is a lower risk.
It is.
Like the core risks are, being able, the big risk, I think, if you're working right now, is disruption to your income, because we always talk about this. Your income is way more important than the return you get on your investment.
Right.
And yes, there's possibly a chance that you could put $10,000 into something and turn it into 20 in a year.
Yep.
But that shouldn't be your expectation. And
no.
If you have a realistic expectation that $10,000 might be $11,000 next year, or you could lose your job and wish you had that $10,000, right? Like it's there. You have to weigh the risks, and I think risks are probably in order while you're working: risk to employment, risk to life. Obviously, is
Health
a big
risks.
one, right? Health risk, life, having life insurance, making sure your family's taken care of, etc. Inflation is a risk,
Yep.
right? There's all these other risks, and somewhere down the line, it's opportunity loss.
We were having a conversation with one of the women that Kaylee works with, and this is dark, but
Uh-oh.
she was talking about life insurance and how her husband's worth so much more when he's dead. And she was just like, man, if my husband died, I'd be rich. And I asked her, I was just like, well, what does that mean? She was just like, oh, he's got a $500,000 life insurance policy. But I was like, okay, well, he makes $100,000. So would you rather have a $500,000 now or $100,000 a year for the next 25 years?
Right.
That math doesn't math.
Yeah. I've heard that joke before, right?
Of
like,
course.
I'm worth more dead than alive or whatever. But
Yeah, maybe right now, but when you factor in your income over the next 20, 10, 15, 30 years, that is not the case. You are almost always worse off.
I mean, when you're looking at life insurance from a financial planning perspective, if you are in the accumulation phase, then life insurance is literally insuring against the loss of your income. That's
Right.
like the biggest thing that we're insuring against there.
100%. Yeah, it's a tough conversation, but those are the other things that we bump into. It's one thing if you don't have a cash reserve. I think in a lot of cases it's probably solvable if you do the right things. While it may not be easy, I'll say it's definitely worth it.
Yeah.
But the life insurance side of things, if you have an event where life insurance is needed and you don't have it, that's detrimental.
I think that, there are a lot of ways that your finances can be disrupted, right? And it's not always loss of life. It can be loss of life. It could also be divorce. It could be just loss of your
disability.
job, right? It could be disability, which is a huge one, huge risk that, I personally am unprepared for probably.
Same.
I just, trust that everything's going to work out.
Wear your seatbelt.
Hope is not a strategy, Colin.
Right.
But I think it is important to keep in mind that I don't have very many regrets when it comes to finances. I feel like everything's a learning experience and you survive it and you get stronger from it, et cetera, et cetera. But the few that I do have, either from an investment standpoint or just finances in general, is when I see something coming and I don't do anything about it. And we don't know what things look like 5 years from now when it comes to AI, when it comes to our economy, et cetera. We don't know what things look like a year from now.
Totally.
But we know without a doubt that it's going to be different, that there's going to be change. And if you have this opportunity to prepare ahead of time and you don't take advantage of it, you have no one to blame but yourself.
Market's at all-time highs right now.
Yeah.
Recognize the fact that we're in a fantastic place in the market. It's basically never been better.
It's been great for 15 years.
Correct. And I was admittedly in one of our podcasts unapologetic or maybe unsympathetic with what happened in February and March. And as I look at it, the reason why maybe I was a little dismissive over the situation was the market was up 5% year to date. I think it peaked February 18th and then it dropped. So it was down 14%. So worst case scenario, that was call it 19% swing, depending on the indice, plus or minus 3 or 4%.
Right.
A lot of people were really upset about it because they were worried about trade wars. Certainly, I can appreciate that. But we're talking a relatively small swing.
Yeah.
In 2008, the market was down 49%.
Yeah.
Imagine if you had $1 million portfolio and within a few months you woke up and it was $500,000.
Yeah.
That is a massive change. And in the Great Depression, it was even more than that.
Yeah.
So it has been a very long time since we've had a legit recession, depression. And I'm not saying that this is going to happen anytime soon, but I think the possibility that it could come at some point is maybe not a statistical certainty, but it's very close.
Yeah. And I think if you're, and again, like we're not doomers, right?
Right.
We look for opportunities, and sometimes the opportunity is to prepare for times that are not as good as the times that you're in.
Absolutely.
Right? And I think that if you're young and you're saving into your 401k, then a market downturn like we had at the beginning of this year is an opportunity to buy things on sale.
Definitely.
Right? If there's money you're not going to touch for the next decade or longer, then let it ride. Like figure out, what the right strategy is for you, what the right risk profile is for you, but don't change it because you think something might happen next year.
Right.
This is, even if you look at 2008, if you were not diversified, if you were just in, let's call it just the S&P 500, it was a 5-year period of struggle, right? That is not fun. But if you have more than 5 years before you need the money, then you can ride that out.
You can.
Right? If you have some area of your savings or investment that you might need before 5 years, like sooner than 5 years,
you should think about that.
Yeah, evaluate that. That's the opportunity. That's like, I don't want people to change their approach to their long-term investments because of a short-term possibility. But for their short-term savings and investment, that's exactly where you should be assessing the risk.
Totally. I think what we're talking about here is obviously not investment advice, but investing principles.
Right. Exactly.
So when we look at our clients and when we look at these types of situations or we have these types of conversations about our own personal lives in the business, it's, is that cash reserve available if the worst should happen?
Yeah.
And when we say worst should happen, normally what we're considering is if that person's an accumulator and is going to get laid off from their job. Or if they're a retiree, if there's some sort of huge cataclysmic event and you have that cash set aside for a year. But then on top of that, if you have additional spending that you're going to need, just like you said, we have to make sure that that's also protected because, a recession can last 3, 4, 5 years. That's not that uncommon. And if that's the case, you really don't want to be selling stocks and investments at a loss when that's going on.
Yeah.
So sometimes more is better than not enough.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. So one other thing I want to think about when we talk about preparation, it's not just building up an emergency reserve or just assessing the risk that you have in your finances, but it's also how you can invest in your growth, right? In order to maybe look for an opportunity to work with AI, right? Like we've talked about this before. AI isn't going to take your job, but somebody who is using AI
will take your job.
Right? So I think this is one of those things where you have to try to get ahead of it if you can, lean into it, learn more, realize that just because what you're doing every day at work changes doesn't mean your value goes away, right? Like you can find, hopefully, a different way to add value, a different way to get paid for the value that you add. And if that means training, learning, soaking up as much as you can, investing in yourself, not going to get an MBA and spending like X number of thousands of dollars on that, but just,
taking on more debt.
Yeah, don't. The answer here, and it's kind of scary actually right now, MBA applications are at an all-time high we haven't seen since 2008, and the reason they were so high in 2008 is because the job market sucked.
So people wanted to become more marketable.
They had no other choice. They were basically looking at this like, I can't get a job. I guess I'll go back to school. And that's kind of what we're looking at again right now, it seems. So I don't think the MBA is, and again, I'm not trying to knock an MBA. I know some very talented MBA people who I see every day. But it's really important to look for opportunities to improve or like increase what you know, right? To have that growth mindset and look at this as a path to the future that you can travel on as opposed to something that's just happening to you.
Yeah, well, when it comes to planning and finances, if you want to get further ahead, there's only 2 levers that you can pull.
Right.
Which is you can reduce your expenses or you can make more money. And you can only reduce your expenses so much.
Yeah.
So I agree that you have to figure out a way that if you can no longer reduce your expenses further, how can you get further ahead in life? And whether that's online courses, I mean, I think it's Team Treehouse that does it. There's programs that are online that you can sign up for that are pretty affordable, and it will teach you how to be a programmer, or it will teach you how to do online marketing, or there's a million different skills. And once that's done, it will generate a resume for you and it will post it online, and most people get jobs right after these sorts of things. Did you know consumer debt levels right now is currently 120% of debt to income ratio for the average U.S. family, which is almost the same as what it was in 2007.
Okay. Yeah. So what does that mean? So debt to income ratio is including any mortgage on their home or student loans?
Correct. Yeah. So the average debt that someone has right now is basically $105,000 per family.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, look, sometimes I feel like we talk about these numbers and they're national numbers.
Right.
And they cover a broad spectrum of people.
I think also people look at these numbers and think, oh, well, if that's the debt to income ratio, then 2008 is right around the corner. That's not exactly what that means.
Right.
But what it does mean is that there are a lot of people right now that are probably living paycheck to paycheck that don't necessarily have the right savings built up.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, these recessions and depressions, while wealthy people do lose money, it really affects the lower and middle classes the most.
Yeah. I think one thing to try to keep in mind is like how you can focus on this potential risk while also enjoying the life that you're living today. Right. And, some people might go that old fallback. Well, I guess I shouldn't buy this latte today because that $5 is going to make a difference. Right. And, if you're, we all have all these subscriptions these days, right?
Yep.
And it's, it's $18 for this streaming service and $11 for that one or whatever. And they add up. I understand that. But that, let's say that you cut half of those streaming services and now, you save $40 a month.
It adds up.
It adds up, but that less than $500 a year is not going to be the make or break number for you, right? So I don't think it's about not buying that latte or cutting that subscription. I think it's about the bigger impact expenditures. Those are the ones that you want to think, is this the time to upgrade my vehicle or should I wait and see look, if we're right, and you still have a job, right? But other people are maybe worse off, then you're going to have a better car market that you can buy in, right?
In theory, that's true. Yeah. Going back to the making more, spending less, it's probably a scary thing for someone that's been in a job for a long time to think, I'm going to change careers or do something else or whatnot, because it's, the devil type of situation is better.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of opportunities with some crazy emerging technologies right now that if you were to be able to harness and grasp that and to really lean in to be an expert, so to speak, I think you could go some pretty crazy places with that.
Yeah. I think there is some potential here where there is no big impact on the economy or the job market, and we somehow miraculously navigate this great technological change better than we've ever done in human history.
Yep.
But I think the odds are that we don't do that. I think the odds are that there will be some sort of disruption. And if there are opportunities to prepare for it ahead of time, it's great, right? It's basically prepare for the worst, hope for the best, and position yourself for both scenarios if you can.
I was out to drinks last night, as you know, with several other financial advisors. And they are at a big firm that everybody knows, but I won't mention it. And it was interesting. They were asking me how it's going with our business and all that good stuff. And one of the things that I brought up was the fact that some of the technology we have is unbelievable, and how it's made our work with clients so much easier, more effective, and more efficient. Yeah. And they kind of laughed and were like, oh, yeah, what, like AI?
I think when it comes to the way that we work with AI, it's really meant to augment the work we're doing with our clients, right? It's meant to basically allow us to service more clients, to help more people, to broaden our reach, and to provide them with the guidance that they need. It's important to just make sure that you are taking advantage of the opportunities in front of you, and some of those opportunities are to prepare for the worst, and some of those are to position yourself to take advantage of the best.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely agree with that. It's using things to your advantage.
Yeah.
If you can.
Exactly that.
How can it help you?
How can
versus
it help you?
Worrying about how it's going to hurt me.
Yeah. Or at least, and again, I don't think the goal here is to worry. It's really to empower, right? Mm-hmm. It's basically, we're not trying to sound an alarm, right? Or raise the caution flag. We're just pointing out some areas where this could impact our clients, and it could impact us, and it could impact our friends and family and community, etc. It will be an impactful experience in good and bad ways.
Yeah, and while there are some probably pretty solid predictions of the future, no one really knows for sure.
100%.
And you won't know until you arrive.
Exactly.
Reflecting back on episode 9, this conversation was less about fearing AI and more about preparing for what's ahead. The pace of change is real. Jobs are evolving and some will disappear. But that doesn't mean you can't stay ahead of it. Resilience, adaptability, and taking ownership of your personal growth are going to be the difference makers. Appreciate you all for being part of this dialogue. Thanks for listening. If this episode sparks something for you, feel free to share it with a friend. Be sure to follow or subscribe so you don't miss future episodes of the Compound Growth Podcast.
Compound Growth with Wheeler and Colin. Sponsored by Ko-Fi Advisors. Reach out today. Yay!